Hello, and welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the ups and downs of the creative process and how to keep it moving. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. I am a writer, singer, improv comedy newbie, science fiction geek, and creativity coach who loves helping right-brained folks get unstuck. I am so excited to be coming to you with interviews and coaching calls to show you the depth and breadth both of creative pursuits and creative people, to give you some insight into their experiences and to inspire you. Today's guest has written more than 50 pieces of music for choir and for handbells, and is well known as a guest festival conductor, particularly for handbells. He retired from Bucknell University's music department, where he was department chair, professor of music, and director of choral studies in 2014. He's also a recipient of the Elaine Brown Award for Choral Excellence from the American Choral Directors Association. Dr. William Payn, also known as Dr. Payn or just DP to his students, has been an important part of my life and a big influence. I spent 4 years singing for him in Bucknell's Rooke Chapel Choir, where I learned more than just great choral music. He joined me recently to talk about his history with music from childhood on, his experiences of conducting versus composing, how to encourage people to do more than they think they can, and how a particularly memorable choral performance in Boston, a rarefied experience for us all, came to be. You can find links to recordings of the pieces we sang and some others we mentioned in the show notes at fycuriosity.com. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Bill Payn. Dr. Payn, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's always so much fun to talk to you.
My pleasure.
You've been doing music your entire life.
Yes.
How did that start?
Well, when I was 5, I was sitting down at the piano and playing my sister's lessons, which pissed her off. But I didn't even have the music in front of me. I heard what she played and then I would play it. And so my parents figured there was probably something there. So they started giving me piano lessons, and one thing led to another. So my early childhood, middle school, high school was basically piano. And and I started organ when I was in like 9th grade. And then I landed a church job as a high school student in a Methodist church in a town nearby, and had that for a year. And then another church wanted me. So I switched churches and did that organist job until I went to Westminster Choir College.
So was the church job where you started doing choral music?
No, it was just organ. I was the accompanist. I played the organ, and I, of course, learned a lot just by observing choral director. And so I would play for the, rehearsals and on Sunday mornings.
So then when did you start doing choral music? Was that at Westminster?
Yeah, Westminster is where that all started. I didn't even really know that I had a voice, Nancy. I did sing in the high school choir. I sang in choirs in high school, but I was more into the band because I played the clarinet as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I ended up being first chair. My father had been a clarinetist, and so he was willing to. He knew clarinets, and he knew what I needed to make the sounds that I wanted. So he bought me a really nice clarinet. And I did that all through high school. And so band was a little more in my, thinking at that point, my musical experience in high school. And I was known as the musician. And so I would do duets with some of the other students that I knew. And so, it was a great identity for me at that time because I wasn't into sports or anything like that,
Right.
So when I went to the choir college, I started taking voice lessons, and all of a sudden I realized I had something in there. Maybe not as a soloist, but certainly to be able to imitate and help choirs know what kind of sound I was looking for.
Right. So do you ever play the clarinet anymore?
Nope. No.
Okay.
I haven't touched clarinet for over probably 40 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I just kind of went by the wayside. I did play it when I was at the choir college. several singers would do works by Schubert that had clarinet
Mm-hmm.
with the Shepherd on the Rock is one thing that comes to mind. One of the voice solos that comes to mind that uses clarinet. So I played it through college, but then after that.
Because I've never heard you mention it before. That's why I wondered.
Yeah. Just kind of a thing of my past. Yeah.
Ancient secret. Dr. Payn used to be a clarinetist.
I know. Funny.
Now it can be told.
Right. Yeah. It's funny that this interview is coming up because I'm doing a guest conducting gig in Raleigh next weekend that's sponsored by the Raleigh Ringers, and this is people from all over the country who are coming to ring bells on an advanced level, and they're having a fireside chat with me in one of the breweries
cool.
evening. And they've sent me this list of questions,
Oh, wow.
Very much so this will be great. This will be a good rehearsal for me, too.
You'll be all set.
I know.
Except that I don't have a list of questions because I don't know. I don't think that's as easy or as much fun, but they don't know you. So,
right.
Whereas I feel like I've known you forever.
Oh, I know.
Which, my mother likes to tell me that the first time I met you was at a children's choir festival in, I want to say Hanover, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was.
Who knows how old I was, probably like 6 or 7. I don't remember this, so it feels very apocryphal to me. But yeah.
I remember that festival. Yeah. I remember where they put me up, which was just like over a garage or something. I was just like, those were the days.
So were you doing more quick kids music back then?
I was doing much more than I have since I came to live in Lewisburg and teach at Bucknell. As a church musician, of course, when I graduated from Westminster Choir College, I graduated. My principal instrument was organ with kind of a emphasis on church music, and I thought I wanted to be a church musician for the rest of my life. And that's where I was headed. And so my first position was in Ohio at Second Presbyterian Church, and I was responsible for all the children's choirs, bells, the adult choir, everything. And there were a lot of choirs. And I even had those little first graders and I think 5-year-olds. And I remember Choristers Guild was so helpful because they're a firm that helps you develop programs and stuff for children. So, and I had learned a good bit about it at the choir college, but the children seemed to respond to me. And so at that point in my life, I was 22 years old. I could relate to them pretty easily. And so we had a great time and we made great music. Eventually, my wife at the time, Kay, because it just became too much, took some of the children's choir work. And then when we moved to Morristown, 2.5 years later after I went to Ohio, they did hire Kay part-time to do the children. And I did everything from, I think, middle school on up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised that, you had no trouble relating to little kids because you've always seemed to me to be a little kid in a 6-foot-tall body.
It's so true. It's so true.
I mean, I remember Halloweens in chapel choir.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'm still wearing costumes and doing all that. Yes.
Yes. So. For people who don't know you, Dr. Payn would just conveniently have to take his son trick-or-treating that night and wouldn't be at rehearsal and someone else would take rehearsal. And then he would, suddenly out of nowhere appear in a costume with fangs and wild hair and blood on his tux shirt and run around the chapel and then play the toccata and fugue in D minor to just scare the crap out of all of us in the most fun possible way.
It was fun. And I continued that with the Susquehanna Valley Chorale too. So,
oh, good.
Yeah. Every once in a while I pull that out. So I still have it. I still have that. Those tales, I can still fit into them.
The trick-or-treating excuse is not quite as easy anymore, I would think.
No.
But I do remember the surprise my first year when you did that. It was like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah, I know. And I think one of those years there were prospective students in the back, so they probably never came. They just went out screaming, thinking I'm never coming to this school.
Or they probably, if they were the right prospective students, said,
Yeah,
"Oh yeah, this is where I need to be."
exactly. Because they're not.
Because,
We have.
chapel choir for me was always sort of like, I mean, I never joined a sorority or did any of the Greek stuff. And to me, it was kind of like a self-selecting group like that, where we were all exactly the right kind of crazy. I mean, we used to joke that part of the audition was to make sure we had the right personality.
Yeah, and that comes through so fast. Yeah, I mean, it's all part of it. Truly. I mean, I'm listening to the voice, obviously, and whether you can read, but I'm also talking to each student, or I was talking to each student, just finding out a little bit about them, and that told me a lot. Yeah.
Yes,
Sometimes
this one's
I didn't
crazy.
make
They can come join the choir.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll get them to sing eventually.
Yeah. If you're crazy,
I
you
was
can
so
carry a tune.
lucky. I was so lucky at Bucknell. The talent was amazing, and just to work with students like yourself who were not music majors, but were really choral music was a passion, and it didn't matter what their background was or what their religious affiliation was. If they loved to sing, that's all I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So
well, and
cool.
I think I've probably told you that I frustrated the heck out of my dad when it was college admissions time, because he kept saying, do you want to go look at schools? I was like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Because we started coming up for candlelight when I was in middle school. So by the time that came around, I was like, no, I need to go there. I have to sing in that choir.
Yeah.
It was like, major, I don't care about major. I don't care about academics. I mean, I cared, but that was really why and it was the only school I applied to, which is a sentence that makes college admissions counselors everywhere have heart failure. But
Sure.
Yeah, I had two moments of truth. One was when I pulled my early decision letter out of the mailbox and thought, oh, if this doesn't say what I want it to say, I'm kind of in trouble.
Yeah.
And then the second was when I went to audition with you and I thought, oh, it never occurred to me what would happen if I didn't get in. Fortunately, that wasn't a problem.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah.
Thank God in so many ways, because it would have been a radically different experience if I hadn't.
Absolutely. And I did have, once in a while, I'd have a student that would come in with high expectations of making it, and they wouldn't. And they would be really disappointed. But I would just say, work really hard in concert chorale, and I'll be watching you, and audition again. And almost always, if they really wanted to be in the choir, they re-auditioned and made it.
So, because I haven't heard you say that before, but it doesn't surprise me, because I always think of the fact that, I've worked with other directors since I left Bucknell, and I knew before I left Bucknell that I was spoiled rotten. And that it was going to be a horrible adjustment for me to have to go sing somewhere else, right, in so many different ways. But one of them is, I've worked with people who would hand out a piece of music and say, now this is really hard. I don't know if we're going to be able to do this, but we're going to try it. And I would always think, the one thing Dr. Payn never said to us was, this is really hard. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it, which of course, immediately what I think of is Copland in the beginning, which is a bear.
Yes. Oh my God.
And you never ever said to us, we might not be able to do this. You just handed it to us and we ran through it. And I think the fact that, if you say to somebody, you might not be able to do this, then it's in their head.
Yeah. It sets up expectations of failure. Yeah. So no, that was, and even there were a couple of times, when I gave a piece to the choir, and I thought to myself, I don't know, but I never said to them. And if I felt that a piece wasn't going to work, I just didn't even go there with the choir. I just put it away, and eventually they might 2 months later say, what about this piece that we were doing? And I would say something like, oh, I forgot about it, or, whatever.
Yeah, there's only one time I remember you deciding that we weren't going to do something, and that was the Charles Ives Psalm 150, I think.
That's exactly what I'm referring to. Yeah. And, I didn't want to do it. And after we rehearsed it a few times, I just thought, this is a waste of time. There's so much prettier stuff Yeah.
I was
And
sort of
so
thinking we were all going to have our own individual note in that piece, as I remember.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually in the beginning is far harder than that. And later on in choirs that I had, there was one instance when we were starting a La Yelo piece, and they had to have it learned in 4 weeks to perform because Fitzwilliam was coming, and it was a piece with string quartet and piano.
Mm.
And they came back from break after Christmas. I gave them this piece of music, which was like 30 pages long, and I said, we have 8 rehearsals to get this perfection because we're doing it with Fitzwilliam. And they just looked at me and went, okay. And we did it.
Well, and that's the thing. We trusted you implicitly. It was like you weren't going to put us in a situation where we were going to fall flat on our faces.
Right. Yeah. And that experience with ACDA was amazing for me.
It was amazing for all of us.
I remember the night before when we talked through the concert and just tried to imagine what it would be like, and how the excitement of everybody. It was just the energy was, and that's why we all burst into tears at the end.
Well, being in that space added so much to it too.
Oh my gosh, we were so lucky to be able to sing in that space and not in a ballroom.
Yeah, it was Trinity Church at Copley Square in Boston. And, I don't know if I ever told you, but my aunt and uncle and one of my cousins came. And afterwards, when I saw them, my cousin looked at me and she said, I knew you sang, but I didn't know you sang. Yeah. And I think we were all high as kites for a couple days on that.
Definitely.
I do remember you telling us that we weren't allowed to tell anybody that people told you we were better than Westminster. It's like, you can't say this if Jim Jordan's in the room.
Exactly.
And I remember you telling us his reaction when you told him that we were going to do the Copland too.
Yeah. No, just total disbelief.
Yeah, which I recall was basically, oh God.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But this is why I say, I feel, absolutely incredibly lucky, but also so spoiled because now, I'll look at a choir that balks at doing something way easier than that. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? That's not hard at all.
Yeah, I know.
Like my whole scale for
everything
assessing things like that is way different than everybody else's.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So how did you come to realize that, setting that expectation that this might be too hard was a really bad idea? Was that just something that you had already kind of innately figured out, or?
I mean, about the Ives piece, that kind of thing?
Just in general, not saying this might be too hard. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I knew that if I set up that expectation that it probably would fail, or that the choir would look at it like, oh, well, we're not really going there with this. So I don't know, why I did that. It seemed to be part of my being. I think you know me as being a fairly positive person. Mm-hmm. So, usually the glass is half full for me most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a lesson that I learned from you without you actually teaching it, and you just kind of demonstrated it.
Sure.
So, when I was teaching, I would never look at a kid and say, I know this is hard. It's like, no, you can do this. We just have to figure out the right way for you to get it. Mm-hmm. That's all.
Right. And it's wonderful. And I think it gives them a sense of confidence that otherwise they wouldn't have if you said, well, this is really hard, but we'll try.
Yeah. I think we all figured out the Copland was pretty hard. And you did tell us how Jim Jordan reacted when you told him.
Yeah.
But I think you waited until we were a fair bit into it before you told us that.
Exactly. And that was actually, in some ways, it was a positive because you heard it as being this guy from Westminster Choir College is saying this piece is really difficult.
Right.
And we're doing it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And then, we would also joke about how we were always going to scare the hell out of the freshmen because you had us come back early. So we'd already started it.
Yes.
And they would come in and just be, yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even just that piece. It was other stuff too that kind of became the running gag.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to go learn half of this so that we can scare the hell out of the freshmen.
I know. They caught on quickly, but
rite of passage. Well, it made it easier for them. So, because
yeah, right.
they weren't stumbling along with the rest of us.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think we all did pretty much feel like we could do anything you threw at us by the time we left.
That's neat.
So,
and I felt like that choir could do anything for the most part, within the scope of that choir, a 40-voice choir. We couldn't do Verdi Requiem, but because you need a huge choir to make that happen. So, and as the years went by, the literature became much more sophisticated in my 32 from when I started. I remember the library and how kind of pathetic it was when I got there, and how it just grew because all of a sudden there were these new composers, young composers that were coming up, and then I was discovering Scandinavian composers, Norwegian composers, that things that I'd not heard before. So it was a growth experience for me too. Yeah.
Well, that's how it's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you'd be bored.
Right. And
if you're bored, you're not going to throw hard stuff at anybody.
No. And as a teacher, don't you think you're always learning?
Oh, yeah.
And you learn from your students many things. So
much.
Yeah. But you also, just because you're preparing and kind of getting yourself ready for the next chapter, whatever that may be, you're doing research, you're constantly active. And that's what I'm liking about retirement, the fact that I'm still conducting the Susquehanna Valley Chorale and Orchestra, and so it keeps me ahead of the game. I know what's going on in the world, and colleagues will say, you ought to try this piece or whatever, and I'm joining consortiums so that we can commission new works, which I think is important.
Yeah. So speaking of new works, I'm curious to know, because I write, but I write words. So I don't know how similar the experience of writing text is to writing music, but I know sometimes when I write, it's like pulling teeth, and other times when I write, it's like there's something that's just kind of coming through you and you better just get out of its way and let it out. And I'm curious to know what it's like writing music for you.
When I wrote with What Shall I Come Before the Lord for the chapel choir, for the 45th anniversary of the chapel, I believe it was, I was going to use that text, the Micah, that's on the back of the chapel,
right,
on the outside back wall, with What Shall I Come Before? And that text totally inspired me, and I wrote that piece, I think, in like 10 days.
Wow.
And normally, whether it's choral or handbell, it takes me several months to really hone in. But I knew what I wanted, and I think I was writing for my own choir. I was writing for a special celebration of a building that I knew and loved, and so all of those personalities came into play. I knew each section what they could handle, vocally range. So all of that was in my head already. And then I do compose at the piano, and I started improvising, and a lot of composers do this. Just started improvising with that text, thinking, how could I? And it just came to me. It was, and so you've experienced, it's just like this wash. When I wrote, there's a bell piece called Elegy that I wrote for Dwight Menard, yeah, that was his name, died of AIDS. After I first came to Bucknell, I think is when that happened. It was because when you came to Bucknell, that was the peak of the AIDS crisis. And and it was still secret then,
Right.
but I knew Dwight as a friend, as a colleague, and his choir had asked me to write this piece.
Ooh.
And I remember sitting in the chapel
Mm-hmm.
at that piano. It was on the floor at that time. I can see it totally, the music, everything. And I wrote that piece in one sitting. I had to go back and then kind of tweak it.
Right.
But it just came out of me because I was emotionally involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like you, I think there are certain circumstances that allow you to create.
Yeah.
And then there are other times when it's hard, I have to just put it away. And that's why sometimes it takes me a few months to write something, because it's not happening.
Right.
You understand that?
Yeah. If you force it too much, you just end up frustrated and with something you don't like. So,
right.
Yeah. There are people in the writing community who will, they like to say, writers write. I was like, well, yes, obviously. And there's this whole idea that, if you don't write every day, you're not a real writer. And it just annoys me because no, sometimes that's just self-abuse. It's not getting you anywhere, and it's going to frustrate you and mean you don't write at all anymore. So no, sometimes you have to know when today's not the day. And other days you have to say, okay, there's sort of something here. It's not easy, but it's coming and I can work with this. And other times it just happens like magic.
I know. And those days, I'm never impressed with a musician that says, well, I sit down at the piano every day from 8 a.m. until noon and compose. And that's never really impressed me, because for me, if I go out for a walk here at the farm or run or whatever at 8 a.m, and I think that that's more helpful to me than sitting down at the piano in some moments. There are other days when I can't wait to get to the piano, but all of life's experiences are what help you to write or compose. And so if something comes up, these people that say they write from 8 to 12, well, what if there's some life experience that comes along at that time period and you say no to it,
Right. Right. And there is something to being in the habit of doing it that does kind of prime your brain. So it's not like that's a terrible idea, but I don't think you need to be a slave to it.
Oh, totally. Totally. No. And I think when I'm writing, I'm pretty good about just sitting down and, okay, this is my opportunity to make music and make it happen. But sometimes I'll be there for 4 hours, and then other times I'll walk away after an hour. Say, okay, I'll come back to this tomorrow. Isn't it interesting when you come back to it, all the stuff that you see that you didn't see?
Oh yeah.
When you first put it down on paper, it's amazing to me, the process. And I would talk to the choir about this too. We would start a piece of music and you just feel like, oh my God, are we ever going to, like in the beginning? And then all of a sudden, magically, there's a period where we processed it to the point where things start happening. Yeah.
It starts to click and make sense.
Yep. And
it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and as you were talking just now, I was thinking, so that whole rush feeling of, I've just written 10 pages in an hour and I don't even necessarily know where they came from. They're just here. Right. Is like its own kind of high, though. Usually after I do that, I feel like I've just run a marathon. I'm really tired. Whereas I've told a couple people this, every transcendent experience I have ever had has been singing in a choir.
Wow.
When something really comes together, like the Foray at Bucknell, definitely like in the beginning in Boston. And not only those, but there's a different kind of high that comes with that for me. And it's not the same as the writing. The writing is great, but if I had to pick one, I'd pick the musical one.
Sure.
Because it's just, I don't know, it's like transporting. And I'm tired afterwards, but in a really, really good way. Not like I need to go sleep for a week. More like I'm tired, but I feel like I could go do anything. And I wonder, how is it as a conductor? Is it like that when you hear all of that coming together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a adrenaline rush. Yeah. Amazing. Candlelights were always that way for me, and every night was different, um, in its own way. But, and those experiences, and just every Sunday morning, you could walk away with a real feeling of accomplishment. And yeah, I definitely, that high is there.
I think that has to be why you do it, right? I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
Why do any of it if you're not going to get that out of it?
No, and you heard me say to the choir many times, this is why you do this, because you have had that experience. You've had that high at some point, and you had it at Bucknell, and so you never want any less than that. You may not ever get it, but you always strive for that.
That's why I know I'm spoiled.
Yeah, and my determining factor was Westminster Choir College. I mean, I got to sing with Bernstein and with Steinberg and with Stokowski and all these great conductors singing this great music with the New York Philharmonic, Philadelphia Orchestra, the American Symphony. That was my learning, and so that has gone with me for all my life. If it hadn't been for the choir college, I know I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, or what I was doing. It totally inspired me to be that way and to make that kind of music.
Yeah, and then you passed it on to us because you had to have that, so therefore we had to have it.
Right. Yeah. So that's that high.
Yeah, and yet when you start, it doesn't sound like that. You have no idea that you might actually end up there. I mean, when you're plunking out notes on a piano and you can't figure out where that stupid G sharp is and why you can't find it in the middle of this chord and you're never going to hit it, you're just sitting there saying, I don't know, man.
I know.
This is messy. This is not easy. And that's the thing that I think people forget. They look at a finished piece of art or a novel or hear a piece and they don't realize how much blood, sweat, and tears went into it. And so they say, but mine doesn't look like that. Well, it did on day 1.
Yeah.
And day 30.
Yeah. No, we were in Jamaica last fall, and we had the opportunity to go to Noel Coward's house. Ooh. Where he lived, where he summered, or wintered. I don't remember what, but he was of course a playwright, but he also was an amazing painter, artist.
Well, and didn't he sing too?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So he did all that stuff. And to see the environment in which he worked was just amazing to me. And because it was way up high on a hill, looking down over beautiful Jamaica and waterways and stuff. The ocean was right there. And so he had all this inspiration, and it was very quiet. And he had his piano and very simple house. Very simple. I think he had a housekeeper, and and one bedroom and a pool, and a kitchen, which I don't think he used very much. I think he just had food sent up because he could,
right?
Or he might have had a cook. But that, looking at that, I could identify, because of the simplicity of the atmosphere, but just the fact that he needed that inspiration and took advantage of it. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. It's like I'm listening to the birds chirping in the background here and thinking, must be great for you to be able to just sit and listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky to be here in this farm because we have no noise now. We did when Walnut Acres was going strong. There were, the canning process was going on, and there was noise. And then the farm across the street was a dairy farm, and so there was stuff going on over there all the time, but we don't have the plant. We don't have the dairy farm. It is absolutely all here is the birds and the frogs.
That's great.
And the peepers and, and the cat's meowing like one is now.
That's great.
Because I'm not letting her in. So, yeah, that helps the creative process.
Yeah. So I want to go back in time a little bit because I know that we've talked before that you had kind of a difficult childhood. Mm-hmm. And I know you had told me that you always knew that you were different from everybody else. And I'm just wondering how that factors into where you've ended up now. Did it push you more in a creative direction or?
Oh, absolutely. And Ruth Chip says to me quite often, okay, you had these experiences with your mom, but it helped you it brought that. When the beatings happened, I was just going into another dimension, mm-hmm. basically. I guess I learned to do that, so I didn't have to face it.
You'd have to.
Yeah. And I think that put me, and then when I needed to escape, also, I would sit down to the piano and I would read through just volumes of music, just one after the other. Mm-hmm. And I would be sitting at the piano and I could see my dad reading the paper or whatever. And I think he really enjoyed it, mm-hmm. but he didn't know how to react. He never acknowledged that all this was going on. Ooh. So it's hard, and I've accepted it. And I know that they were a different time period, mm-hmm. and my mother probably was very mentally ill. So I accept it. I've become the person I have become, I think, as a result. I wouldn't hope that for anybody to have that. And there were happy times too. So she was schizophrenic. She was manic and schizophrenic, mm-hmm. I think. And because there would be laughter and good times. And of course they encouraged my musicianship.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I knew you had mentioned that before, it had to be kind of an interesting contrast.
It was. And of course I probably, growing up, I probably thought I was a bad person, mm-hmm. because I was told that. But luckily I had a sibling, my older sister, who we both stuck up for each other. Mm-hmm. But when she was being hit or whatever, I felt it.
Right.
And felt the pain, so it's just, and I think I've told you, she and I still cry.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure.
About it. It's just like, why did we have to go through that?
Right.
But in some ways it certainly challenged my life, and because of it, probably it made me have more, perhaps a drive that mm-hmm. someone in my position would need to have in order to kind of get away from that. Right. And yet I was not a really good student. So I think I daydreamed a lot, which is the creative person too. And I think that was another escape. And I just loved being around my friends and going to parties and dancing, and, mm-hmm. homework was not a big deal for me. And oddly enough, I was never forced to study or anything. There wasn't that kind of thing going on. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what that was all about. But yeah, I mean, I had some academic moments that I'm not proud of. But it was a product of that time and where I was and what I was going through. So
did it take you a while, having been told that as a kid, to actually realize that you were good at music?
Yeah. I think I knew. I think I knew that it was something in me, because my friends and my peers helped me to believe in myself that way, because they would say, play the piano or whatever. And so that was my identity at the time, and so I took that on. I was proud of it.
But did you have that contrast where it was like, I know I have this thing, but I'm kind of afraid to believe that I really have it?
Um, yeah, I probably in high school. Yeah. But then the minute I got to the choir college, I realized that I was okay, that I was up there with the other top musicians.
Ah.
Because it could have gone the other way.
Mm-hmm.
I could have gotten there and just been totally defeated.
Right.
There was one kid, his name was Michael Kemp. No, not Michael Kemp. It was Michael, I've lost it, but Michael Korn, who was better than me on the organ. But he'd had different experiences in life. And so it was great because that was a challenge for me to be as good as Michael.
Yeah, I think if you go in and you're the best in the room, then you're not, as likely to push yourself. You don't have anything to push against.
That's right. And the first year that I auditioned for Westminster Choir, I didn't get in.
Oh.
Yeah.
That I didn't know.
Yeah. So that was, and my girlfriend at the time did. So that was a real blow. But it caused me to think, okay, I can do this. I know I can do this. And I think Dr. Lynn probably encouraged me. Have I told you the story about when I did make Westminster Choir?
I don't think so.
Was there a accompanist? I was playing the Brahms "How Lovely Is Thy Dwelling Place" and we were going on tour like the next day, and I totally screwed it up in rehearsal the day before, or maybe 2 days before we left. Yeah, 2 days before. And Dr. Lynn said, "I want to see you afterwards." And I went to his office and he said, "Bill, you're screwing around here. You have the talent to really be good, and you're just playing around too much. He knew I was out partying and wasn't taking a lot of stuff seriously, and that I was relying on my innate talent rather than allowing it to just blossom more." And he said, "I want you to come in here with the Brahms memorized tomorrow. Ooh. And if you don't have it memorized, you're not going on tour."
Well,
yeah.
That's a wake-up call.
Oh, totally. And I think we've all had those moments in our lives where somebody inspired us to just, okay, I'm screwing around here. I'm just going with what I have, and I'm not allowing myself to take that extra step. And so that was the turning point for me at the choir college, and that was my sophomore year, the end of my sophomore year. So, I'll be forever grateful to Dr. Lynn for making me do that. Of course, I was up all night memorizing it, but I went in, played it perfectly, probably because he wanted that. And he said, "Okay, now you've just proven to yourself that you can do this, and you've done it in one night.
Right.
Just think what you can do over a lifetime if you apply yourself," which I wasn't.
Yeah. But aren't we all glad you did?
Oh, and I'm glad I did. Yeah, but that was a biggie.
Yeah, so. No, it absolutely would be. And I think sometimes you really need that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not like he was harsh, It was like not saying, you're awful because you haven't done this. It was like, no, you can do this and you have to prove it to yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that he said that is really telling. It wasn't about proving it to him because he already knew.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting point. I had lunch with, we have scholarship college students in the Susquehanna Valley Chorale. And I was having lunch with my tenor scholarship student who graduated from Susquehanna University. Really great kid, just a great kid. He sang with me for 3 years as a scholarship tenor. During lunch, he said, "Dr. Payn, I just want to tell you something. he said, you called me on something. And he said, it just totally made me think. And I remember the incident. He said, he was in the candlelight procession,
Mm-hmm.
and I had told him, you've got to have it memorized this particular week. Got up there, and he was just not even there. It's totally not, just had no clue what the text was. So I emailed him after that rehearsal, and I said, Ben, you are my scholarship tenor. You are a music major. You want to be a conductor. You do not come to rehearsal unprepared. You need to have this memorized for me next week, and you're going to sing it for me before rehearsal, the words and the music. And I said, and furthermore, you need to be on time for rehearsals, which you've been late sometimes. And there were like 2 or 3 other things. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're a music major. You can do this. You have the ability. And so he did. He said at that point, I almost quit, because he said, I'm not sure I can do this. But he talked to his parents, and they had seen what a difference it was making for him to come to these rehearsals. And they said, listen to him. Mm-hmm. And he did. And he came. And he was, after that, he was the model scholarship tenor, but it made him think. And so.
Yeah, I think, as you're saying that, there are some people who are really, really valuable. And as I'm thinking about this, there are a couple of them that come to mind for me. And you're definitely one of them, that you just cannot even bear the thought of disappointing.
Right. Exactly.
That's how I decided when I started my grad school program. Every 3 weeks I had to mail off this packet of work. And there were times that I just would sit there and go, I have 10 days and I have all of this to do, and it's never going to happen. And somehow by magic it did. It's when I really learned to appreciate deadlines, because I swore to myself, no way was I ever going to send in a packet late. And I never did. And somehow it all got done, even though I wasn't sure how it was going to happen. And the same thing, I would sooner have, slit my own throat than disappoint you. It's like, okay, if Dr. Payn says I can do this, then I have to figure out how to do it, and even though I will admit, when you tell that story, it reminds me of how I managed to get out of singing Once in Royal David City in a quartet for you for 3 years. Until Carissa Krenz outed me senior year, when I'd been doing it for so long that I shouldn't have had to do it for you.
But yeah.
But you never remembered, and I was just terrified. I wasn't going to tell you.
That's so great. Great. Yeah.
No way.
That's right. I was talking to Rob Riker, who, Rob.
Mm-hmm, I do.
Well, he has the bell choir at Bucknell now.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah. He took it over, and he's been so frustrated. He was ready to go on tour in January, and 2 of the students the night before call and say, I can't go.
And for people who don't know, you can't do that with a bell choir. It's like taking keys out of your piano.
Yeah. You don't do that at all.
Right.
And so we talked, and I've talked to a number of alumni that have, because this is happening in the choir as well. The Beth Wheeler had to hire men to go on tour with what was the chapel choir is now Camerata.
Right. No way.
Yes. And so I've talked to a number of alumni, and it's just like, and just like you said, you would have rather died than to come up to me and say, I can't do something. And I remember a bison chip one time saying, I'm going to miss something. And I said, no, you're not telling me you're going to miss something. This is your priority. Either you're in choir or you're in chips. Mm-hmm. You can do both, but this is your priority. And he was there for me. But, I can't believe that this is happening on campus. It's just that sense of pride and commitment seems to be going. And I don't know whether it's this generation or what it is.
It's just, I don't know, but can't imagine anybody ever in the 4 years that I was there even thinking about doing that.
Right.
And I don't know, I mean, because what I'm immediately thinking is that it had a lot to do with the group dynamic as much as anything else. I mean, yes, we didn't want to disappoint you, but it was also, these were our people, you know? So I kind of wonder if that's part of it, but I don't know because I'm not there. But wow. No, we never, ever. If I'd had to miss something, I'd have been heartbroken.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Rob had to cancel the tour because.
Well, you'd have to.
So I don't know, but yeah, for me, and I have the same expectations with the Susquehanna Valley Chorale, and most of the people tend to respond to that, and if they don't, they quit. You know.
Well, and I think it's also, you know, obviously I'm not a part of that group either, but just knowing you and how you work with people, you never talk to us like we were just kids. You know, I mean, we were sort of your kids, but not just kids. And I think when you've got that back and forth where, you know, we respect you, you respect us, and we're all on the same team. And though, thank you for never describing choir as a team, because that would have made my skin crawl. Yeah. but still, you know, we're all here to do this thing together, and we're here for each other. Then I think you're much less likely to do that.
Absolutely. My stepdaughter, Melina, played field hockey at Bucknell, and she and I have over the years talked about the similarities. You know, you mentioned team. That was a team, but the similarities and the camaraderie that she had with her friends on that field hockey team was the exact same as what you experienced in choir. There's no difference. It doesn't matter whether it's sports or music or whatever. You know, there's got to be that. And they won a championship, I think. And why did they? Because they believed in each other and they trusted their coach. They hated their coach, but they they trusted her, you know. So there might have been that fear factor too. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's something that used to be a part of choral conductors' way they approached their choirs.
Well, and some still do.
Being a dictator, you know.
I mean, and I can't say that I was never afraid in rehearsal. I was every time you would say, whoever's flat, fix it, or I'm going to make you all sing it one by one.
Yes. And you saw me.
That probably did more for my tuning skills than anything else.
Exactly.
Like, okay.
And you saw me get mad at Seth when he was banging around during my post list. Yeah. So there were those moments, but
they were very rare. Well, and when you would say fix it or I'm going to have you all sing it individually, that wasn't what I would think of as a Seth moment.
Exactly.
You know,
no.
Yeah, no. There were only 2 of those that I remember in 4 years, and Seth was way before I even got to Bucknell, and I came anyway, just like maybe those students at the Halloween party.
Yeah. Exactly.
But by then I already knew I wanted to come, so that didn't make much of a difference.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if you have to be such a tyrant that you take all the joy out of it, why do you do it? It's like, you know, writers, it's like, if you're not having fun writing your story, nobody's going to have fun reading it because it'll come through. So have fun with it first and worry about whether it's perfect later.
Exactly. I hear you. Yeah. And I think that a lot of the reasons why these conductors were that way was they're just their own insecurities, and
or they were taught.
They weren't prepared or whatever, and so they blamed others for their, you know, if something happens musically, I figure, okay, I need to fix this. I don't go to, you know, the singers. It's something maybe I can present to let them understand better. You know? So yeah. It's a two-way street, definitely.
It definitely is, yeah. And I was thinking earlier when you were talking about your scholarship student that basically what you told him sounds a lot like what you told kids who auditioned for the choir and didn't get in. You know, which it also sounds sort of like what your professor at Westminster said too. It's like, keep working and come back. And
Yep.
I wonder if that's why, that's where that came from, was just,
I'm sure it is.
you know,
because it taught me
you could do this. Yeah.
that it wasn't over, and and it also made me just think, oh, I wasn't even thinking that could go beyond what I'm doing, so
I think we don't. Some of it's just that we don't know what we don't know, like we don't know what's possible, and then some of it is that, but that's for other people, how could I ever do that?
Right.
Kind of thing,
Right.
Especially if you're looking at, the finished book and saying, but my first chapter is 4 paragraphs and they're terrible and I'm never going to get there. Well, everybody's first 4 paragraphs are terrible and they think they're never going to get there.
Right. Exactly. No, definitely. I hear you.
Yeah. But, it's interesting as I talk to you, I'm realizing that even though I mostly write, I sing for fun, but I don't do it professionally, but though occasionally, every so often I will, that there's still so much that translates between the two that I learned just from watching you about how you do something and how you approach it. 'Cause there's, I don't know. I mean, the way that you would, you knew that the beginning was going to be messy and you would get up and demonstrate exactly what you wanted. There's this image that I have in my head of sound between my eyes right above my nose.
Yes,
will never
exactly.
leave me.
Yeah. Coming out of your mouth is up here.
Right. And
yeah,
I think there was a thing with a balloon off the top of your head, but that
I'm sure. I'm sure.
But still, there's so much that you learn, even in the things that you do for fun, that translates, and that you learn from people who really know what they're doing and work with you. And, I don't think it was conscious, but I'm sure when I was writing my book for grad school, it was kind of like, I don't know what this is. And I switched gears halfway through the first semester, which was terrifying because then I'd lost 6 weeks, which is only 6 weeks, but that's still half a semester. And, was like, I have no idea if I'm going to be able to finish this thing in time because I've never finished a novel before. And oh, dear God, I have no idea what I'm doing, but this feels like the direction to go in and I'm going to do it. And I got there. And certainly that has a lot to do with the faculty that I worked with there too. But I'm sure that there was also something in me that I had learned that was saying, it's going to be hard. So what? You can do it. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I probably learned that more from chapel choir than I did from anywhere else. Writing a paper is just, writing a paper, but putting something together that sounds like a random jumble of notes and
to the final
becomes
product.
A thing. Yeah.
That's so neat. That's so cool. Yeah, you just never know.
You don't.
How you're making a difference in somebody's life. You just never know. And so I'm grateful to hear these things and thank you. Sweet. So sweet.
Well, but it's true. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I'm so excited that we finally did it.
You're so welcome.
That's our show for this week. Many thanks to Bill Payn for sharing his time and to you for joining me. Please don't forget to share this episode with a friend. Thanks. You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.